I... Ugh! Sonic Heroes! You know, when this game first came out back in 2004, I was super excited for it. A Sonic game where you play as 3 characters at once? 12 different characters, including the incredibly awesome Chaotix? How could you go wrong? Well, let me tell you, folks, they went wrong. Oh man, did they go wrong. But that wasn't what I thought when I played it almost 8 years ago. I actually liked this game a lot and was upset when I finally beat it. So what happened? Was I just stupid and easier to please? Have I become more jaded now? Probably both. But anyway, let's take a look at Sonic Heroes so I can get this over with. I guess let's cover the story first, if you can call what this game has a story. Each of the 4 teams has their own story, and they're all dumb. Team Sonic, consisting of course, Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, receive a letter from Dr. Eggman letting them know that he's trying to take over the world. And they should all try and stop him if they can. Gah! And that's not even the dumbest story. Team Dark, consisting of Rouge the Bat, the now totally not dead Shadow the Hedgehog, and new character E123 Omega, team up to take down Dr. Eggman after Rouge discovers both Shadow and Omega had been locked up by Eggman, and they now hate him. Yeah. Team Rose, consisting of Amy Rose, Cream the Rabbit, and Big the Cat for some reason, find a headline in the newspaper about Sonic taking off with Froggy and Cream's Chow Cheese's brother or something. So naturally, the 3 decide to go on a crazy adventure together to find the 3. Team Chaotix, consisting of Vector the Crocodile, SBO the Chameleon, and Charmy Bee, are detectives for whatever reason, and get a strange package containing a walkie-talkie from a mysterious client who wants them to do stuff for unknown reasons. They agree to do it because, after all, they never turn down work that pays. Now that nonsense is out of the way, let's talk about the gameplay, and this is where the game really takes a dive. See, as I already mentioned, you play as 3 characters at the same time, each with a different set of moves and a role to play on the team, though each team plays exactly the same. The speed characters can homing attack, stick to walls, make tornadoes, which somehow send them up poles, and are the fastest, naturally. The flight characters carry the other 2 characters over large gaps or up to areas they couldn't reach otherwise. Oh, poor Cream. They can also attack by hurling the other characters at enemies. I hate this move. You have very little control over the characters after they've been tossed, so it can be sometimes really difficult to hit your mark, especially when that mark is a target that you can't seem to reach ever. The power characters are the best ones. They're used for all the fighting you're going to have to do, and trust me, there's a lot of it, as well as breaking through barriers and even gliding up to higher places using fans. I don't get it either. While it might not sound too bad, this setup is incredibly annoying, especially considering none of the formations are particularly good. Speed formation can oftentimes move too fast and send you right off a cliff, and the homing attack only seems to hit when it wants to. Flight formation is just terrible. I recommend never being in it unless you absolutely have to. It's slow, it's cumbersome, it's everything you ever wanted to not be in a Sonic game. The power formation is the best because there's so many enemies to fight in this game, it becomes pointless to ever not be in the power formation. They don't move that slow anyway, so what's the matter? There's also a bizarre level up system in place. Each character can level up 3 times by collecting these little orbs corresponding to their color type on each level, and each level increases the strength of their abilities. If you can level each character up to level 3, it actually manages to make fighting easier and can even make flight formation seem good. It's an interesting mechanic, but it really doesn't feel right in a Sonic game. Each team also has a Team Blast move. This is basically a special move you get when you beat up enough enemies or collect enough rings. It kills everything on screen. Every team's Team Blast is the same with a few minor exceptions. The animations are all different mainly, but also Team Rose gets a short period where they're invincible afterwards, and Team Dark freezes time momentarily. It's not as helpful as it sounds. The whole depending on attacking thing is probably my biggest problem with this game. Because of Sega's idea to put this stupid gimmick of having different formations in the first place, they designed a bunch of enemies that can only be taken down using a specific formation. So you're going to be fighting enemies a lot. And this isn't what Sonic games are about. Yeah, sure, there's some mediocre platforming thrown in, and every stage has a loop or two, but for the most part, you're just beating up enemies. This is Sonic, not Streets of Rage. Why do I have to constantly stop to beat up a bunch of enemies just to progress? Yeah, you can't even skip most of them. You have to beat them up in order to open a door or a switch or something. It's ridiculous. Look, there's even an elevator scene. This isn't a Sonic game, it's a beat-em-up. And it's not even a good beat-em-up. They got too carried away with these enemies. Hell, even two of the boss fights are just fighting a constant onslaught of enemies, in case you weren't sick of fighting them in the regular stages already. And oh boy, don't get me started on the stages. This game has some of the worst stage design in Sonic game history. There's 7 zones, each with 2 acts, just like the old days, and each of the teams must go through the same 14 stages, but with minor differences. Team Dark is harder, Team Rose is easier, and Team Chaotix is a bunch of stupid missions. But I'll get to that in a second. First, let's talk about the stages themselves. They all fall under the typical Sonic tropes. You have your ocean, your factory, your jungle, you got the Eggman base, standard stuff. Oh, except every stage lasts twice, if not 3 times, as long as any of the classic stages. Yeah, prepare to have to play each and every stage for 7 minutes or longer. Like your Sonic stage is short and simple? Well, too bad. Here's a bunch of robots to fight that block the path and take up minutes of your time. It's ridiculous. Believe it or not, Team Rose's stages are actually the best because, since they're the easy team, their stages only last around 4 minutes each. The gameplay and stage designs is still bad, but at least they're short. You need an example? Well, this is Casino Park, the 3rd zone of the game. There's a part where you're in a giant pinball machine and have to break these barriers to get out of it. Too bad the controls are garbage. You can just barely steer the characters, and even then, you always manage to hit a bumper or something that sends you the other way. Watch how long it takes to get out of this one part. See, that was pathetic, and there's still 2/3 of a stage left, and the whole game is like that! The game's 4th zone, Rail Canyon, is all about grinding, and prepare to do that a lot. In fact, you only ever really stop to fight enemies. Surprise! And there's a lot of parts where you get thrown off one rail and have to land on another, and this is not the type of game that allows for precision jumps. And don't ever try to change your character in mid-air, it won't help. In fact, if you get knocked off of the stage as one character and see one of your other characters still on the stage, you can't switch at all. This game changes the rules when you're falling to your death. Thanks for not letting me save myself, Sega. Anyway, back to the stages. The worst stages of all are the final 2 zones. The first is Hang's Castle, a haunted castle area with a bunch of stupid gimmicks. You have to constantly hit switches that flip the castle upside down, you have to ride on trolleys while avoiding enemies, you have to walk on invisible pathways, and the worst part of all is this part towards the end, when each character has to go through their own sort of trial. Flight characters have to take down flying enemies and fly across gaps and stuff like that. It lasts far too long, and since you're like already at the 10-minute mark anyway, your patience is wearing thin. I died at this part as Team Dark so many times, I eventually had to start over from the beginning of the stage. Needless to say, I didn't play the game again for a few days. The final stage is the hardest, which I guess is rightfully so, but for all the wrong reasons. There's rails you have to grind on while giant lasers shoot at you, brand new enemies that can block your attacks, platforms that fall out of the sky, not to mention it lasts 100 hours. It's a nightmare. The only stage I like in this game is the 5th zone, Frog Forest, mostly because there's some interesting ideas in place. There's these giant frogs that can summon rain and make platforms grow, and in the second act, there's black frogs that summon rain that make platforms disappear. It's never utilized to its full potential, but at least there's a hint at some clever game design there. Also, as Team Sonic and Team Dark, you have to outrun a giant alligator, which is pretty awesome. I also feel like I should mention that Team Rose starts with a tutorial level. Why? Is this really the team that Sonic Team expected that people would play as first? I mean, who goes into this game wanting to play as Team Rose at the start of the game? Like, I guess it was supposed to be for like little kids or something, maybe little girls, but I would imagine little kids, even little girls, if they bought this game, they probably wanted it for Sonic. They're going to want to play as Sonic first. Why is the tutorial in front of Team Rose? If you're like me, by the time you got to them, it was the third story. You already knew how to play. So what's the point? Now, if you think all these stages sound bad by themselves, try playing them as Team Chaotix. As I already mentioned, Team Chaotix is basically the game's mission mode. Each stage finds you having to do some stupid task like find 10 hermit crabs or kill all the enemies. Yeah, now it actually is a beat 'em up. Their stages always take the longest, are incredibly frustrating. In the first part of Hang's Castle, you have to find a bunch of keys, and if you're stupid like me, you can actually manage to miss some of the keys. Thankfully, the game takes you back to the beginning when you get as far as you can, but you have to play the same level again. And having to do that, especially in these stages, is terrible. My first time replaying it, it took me 16 minutes and 47 seconds to find all the keys, and I am not joking. Speaking of jokes, let's talk about the bosses, because they suck. First of all, there's hardly any of them. Okay, yes, there's a boss fight at the end of each zone, but twice you have to fight a bunch of robots, and twice you have to fight another team. Only 3 times as each team do you ever fight Dr. Eggman. The first 2 Eggman fights are pretty simple, if not a little tedious. Just keep spamming moves and you'll get him. The last battle with him is very tough, especially as Team Dark. Just look at all this crap raining down on me. Although, my least favorite fights in this game are the team battles, for a number of reasons. 1, none of them make sense. None of them. What reason does Team Rose have to fight Team Sonic? Amy's whole story involved trying to find Sonic, and now she's beating him up? Why? Second, they go against everything this game is about. The whole game promotes teamwork and being friends and stuff like that. But then, all of a sudden, it's like, nope, beat your friends up. Good message! 3, they're unfairly hard unless you know what you're doing. The first few times you fight any of them, even as Team Rose, you will die. A lot. But here's what you do. Just spam the speed character's tornado move, and the other team will be too dumb to not walk into it constantly, and eventually they'll all fall off the stage. Repeat 7 more times throughout the game. The final boss battle takes place in its own story mode, the last story. Here you have to fight Metal Sonic in his new forms, Metal Overlord and Metal Madness. I actually think it's pretty cool that Metal Sonic is the final boss, because this was sort of a coming together of all the major Sonic characters up until this point. And Metal Sonic was really the only one Sega still used that isn't on a team, so making him the final boss makes sense. However, the boss battles still suck. The first boss battle involves playing as all the teams except Sonic and attacking his weak point. It's standard, but drags on for far too long. The final boss is your typical Supersonic in space battle. However, you can only hurt him with a Team Blast, so you have to constantly attack his attacks and gather rings in order to hurt him. 5 hits and he's dead. This battle will forever be one of Sonic Team's biggest missed opportunities. Why? Well, you fight the boss battle as Super Sonic after watching an awful cutscene of him transforming, and Tails and Knuckles agreeing to help him. When I was younger, I was so excited to see Tails and Knuckles help and hoped they'd turn into their long-lost super forms. But nope! Too bad! All they get is golden bubbles that give them the ability to float. Never mind that both these characters actually have existing super forms. Too bad! Only Sonic! Wait until Sonic 06, you'll be mad then too! Makes my blood boil just thinking about it. In order to even get the final story, you first have to collect the 7 Chaos Emeralds, which marks the return of the special stage after a few years' hiatus. Thankfully, you only have to collect each emerald once, and it doesn't matter as which team, because these special stages suck. In order to enter them, you have to find a key hidden in the second act of each level. You then have to make it to the end of the stage, still holding the key, get hit once, and you lose the key. This is stupid, because as I've already mentioned, there's a million enemies in this game, so of course I'm going to get hit and lose the key constantly! Gah! And for what? To play a terrible special stage! Yeah, the special stages suck. Big surprise. Actually, they're not the worst I've played, but they still aren't very good. You have to run down this long tube and collect orbs to fill up your boost gauge. Use the boost to catch up to the emerald before it reaches the end, all while avoiding bombs. Sounds fun? It isn't. especially considering the controls are garbage. Never go too far on the side of the stage, and definitely don't go on the ceiling. You'll lose control and lose the emerald. My advice is to just use the power character. They gather more orbs and they're slower, so they're slightly easier to control. What else can I complain about in this game? Oh, I know! How about the laughable cutscenes? I swear, this game has the worst story and dialogue of any of the Sonic games, and that's saying a lot. As I already mentioned, the story is barely there to begin with, which makes each cutscene that much more random. If you've watched any of our videos before, you know we make fun of the final Team Dark cutscene a lot, but that's just one of the many bad moments in this game. How about that scene where Team Chaotix fights Team Rose?
I was wondering if I could ask you something.
If it's about a date, it'll have to wait.
Date?
Or Team Dark versus Team Sonic? When has Sonic ever said, it'll be a date to die for? Not to mention that the last Sonic knew, Shadow was dead! Is this really how you're gonna treat somebody you thought was dead? This is not how I would react! The dialogue in this game is atrocious! Though, I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy the in-stage dialogue at least a little bit. It's very much about teamwork and encouraging each other on, and can sometimes even be pretty funny, even if it is schmaltzy and sometimes poorly delivered. The music, on the other hand, is awesome. This game has a great soundtrack, as most Sonic games do. So I will give it credit where credit is due. It easily has my favorite Crush 40 song in the climactic What I'm Made Of, and many of the stage themes, like Casino Park and even Mystic Mansion, ironically, are really stellar. The graphics are alright too. They're not the best, but they're still okay. The frustrating camera from Sonic Adventure makes an unwelcome return though, and really drives me insane. It's so hard to make jumps and fight enemies when I can't see what I'm doing. Get ready to fall off the stage a lot thanks to poor camera programming and poor controls in general. So, I know what you're thinking. Matt, tell us how you really feel about Sonic Heroes. Well, it's horrible! What makes it even worse is I remember very fondly liking this game. What happened? Why was I so stupid as a kid? The stages are poorly designed and take forever, the special stages suck, the controls are balls, the dialogue is laughably bad, the bosses are few and far between, each team plays exactly the same, the Chaotix missions are frustrating, there's almost nothing about this game that makes it even worth recommending. Okay, sure, I love the characters, and the way they personalize the Chaotix make them some of the best in the series, and of course the music is awesome, but as a whole, Sonic Heroes is a terrible game, and as most people already know, it's the start of a long, rough road for the Sonic franchise. But you know what the worst part is? It's not even close to the worst Sonic game I have to play. Oh.